Well, happy Friday, everybody. Glad you can be here. Brett Nackman from College Autism Network here, and really glad that you can be with us for our final Canvas meeting, for 2023, not ever, but for this year, because we generally take a break in December. And we're glad you can be here as we have what will be a really riveting conversation with Sandra Thom-Jones, joining us all the way from Melbourne, Australia, to share about their really remarkable research related to autistic folks in academia. A few housekeeping items before we get started. First, please make sure that you are noted as being present here. So we have our meeting agenda, which I am dropping in the chat. And let me do that. Also, if you're not already on our Canvas listserv, we encourage you to do so. So that way you are apprised of our forthcoming meetings and resources that folks share. There's often recruitment for research studies and sharing of new articles, all the things. We encourage you, if you are so inclined, to become a formal College Autism Network member, because you do get certain benefits out of that, including discounted registration for our College Autism Summit, among other resources. And I think it is worth turning it over to our executive director, Dr. Lee Williams, to talk about what was our College Autism Summit 2023, which is now in the rearview mirror. And I know that many of you were present there, and we hope many of you are present at our subsequent summit. But Lee, over to you.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, hi, everybody. Great to see you. Some of you it was great to see you in person. We had over 300 people join us in Nashville, which was amazing, and a high number of about 45 neurodivergent undergraduate students, which made the summit really so lively and fun, and quite different from previous summits. We are, as you might expect, on to 2024, trying to figure out where we're going to be. We're looking for a new host city. We love Nashville, but it's time to branch out. And I'm particularly interested in anyone who would like to volunteer to serve on the research focus committee. Brett has ably chaired that group the last few years, but the work of this group is to make sure that our research interests and researchers and scholars are represented in the program, the overall program of the summit. So if you think you might be interested in serving on that committee, just send me a note through the chat. I'll add you to our mailing list, and then we'll be in touch probably after the holidays with more specifics. Thanks, Brett.
All right, thanks, Lee. Yeah, it's always a good time at the summit, and it was really a pleasure to see so many of you in 3 dimensions, and to hopefully see many of you next year as well. One little note is that we are assembling our schedule of Canvas presenters for 2024. And we know that a few of you here have shown interest, and I will be following up with you regarding that, so we can find time and opportunity toward that end. And in addition to that, we are seeking recommendations from you all if there are presenters, if there are scholars, researchers who have some really compelling research, whether it's more emergent. We know some of you are in graduate school and early career scholars, or more established, to share some of their work with the Canvas community. So what I'm going to be popping in the chat, and you can see it in the meeting agenda as well, is a little survey where you can indicate some ideas regarding potential speakers. But also we want to gauge folks' general availability for meetings. So we can't always accommodate everybody all at once, and we have established a routine over time on Fridays, but we want to be open-minded and see in what ways we might better suit folks' schedules. And of course, we'll always be recording these meetings for folks to watch later. So I'll put that in the Canvas listserv as well. No need to complete it now, but we encourage you to have it open in a window, so that way you can express your your interests, your availability, your ideas on potential presenters, and if you want to self-volunteer yourself as a campus presenter. So again, anybody who has reached out to me already, I will be reaching out to you over the next few weeks, so we can figure out a good avenue for you to hopefully present for us during 2024. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to all of you and find out what are some interesting articles you've come across recently, if there's a resource that you've used. We know some of you attended our College Autism Summit. We would love to hear if there were any takeaways or insights you gleaned from presentations you attended there. So turning it over to all of you in terms of sharing resources, takeaways, interesting insights. So you're welcome to throw those in the chat. You're welcome to turn on your microphone and or video. Over to you. Always the thing, who wants to contribute first, right? Well, I'll get us started. It was really wonderful to see at the summit that we had so many undergraduate and graduate students in attendance, many of whom are neurodivergent and were sharing about their experiences via presentations and conversations. It was really welcoming to have that as even more of a salient part of our summit community. So that was a real takeaway and pleasure to engage with so many students at our summit. Any research studies that folks have come across, or articles or tools? Well, we can, if you feel so inclined to throw something in the chat, you're welcome to do that. I think people are just ready to listen to you, Sandra. They're excited, they're motivated, they are ready. So I think it's worth turning it over to you. Yeah, please feel free to throw stuff in the chat. Jay, thanks for mentioning that in there about the ND Connect tool. Okay, Sandra, it's such a pleasure to have you here. From at least from where we are in so many of us are here in the States, and we know that we have some folks joining in from Europe and Canada and elsewhere. So it's a real worldwide community here to listen to you today. So we have our featured presenter, Sandra Thom-Jones, a consultant autistic professor whose work that we'll be focused on today is related to is academia a good career for autistics? Some really groundbreaking research that elevates the role of autistic academics, and we're it's relatively novel, and so we're just so thrilled to have you here, and thank you for getting up very early down by you to be with us today. So folks, if you have questions or comments, please throw those in the chat, and we'll allocate time at the end for Sandra to address those. So over to you, Sandra.
Thanks, Brett. Okay, so as Brett said, the title of my presentation is Academia a Good Career for Autistics? This was a sort of a passion project of mine, and something that I started doing when I was on leave from work, and I thought, oh, I need to have something to do while I'm sitting at home, relaxing, and it turned into something a bit bigger than that. So just a little bit about me. Obviously, I'm autistic. I have been working in academia up until 3 months ago. I have been working in academia for about 20 years. I was most recently in a fairly senior position as Pro Vice Chancellor at Australian Catholic University. I've stepped out of academia for a little while to really focus on writing and research and consultancy from outside of the academy, to be able to sort of be a little bit more objective and perhaps a little bit more pushy about the things that we need to change to make academia and other spaces a bit more autism friendly. And Alex, who you'll see pop up in lots of my Facebook and website and various other things that I do, is my little alter ego that I use as a way of communicating a lot of aspects of what it's like to be autistic to people who are not autistic and don't necessarily understand us. And sometimes we need to make things really simple for them because they're not as smart as we are. Okay, obviously I don't need to say this to you guys, but I always have it at the beginning of all of my presentations. I'm a big fan of identity first language. You know, I am an autistic person. I didn't pick my autism up when I got up this morning, and I'm not putting it down again when I go out for lunch. So I'm autistic. I recognize everyone's obviously will use the language they're comfortable with, but that's the language that I'm comfortable with. Okay, so the big question for me, and this is one I've wondered about for a very long time, academia appears to provide an ideal career option for us. So here we go. You know, I know this is what I thought when I was a kid. I want to be a professor when I grow up because I can lock myself away in this ivory tower and read lots of books and write lots of books and just use my extensive knowledge of the things that I know about on my very, very specific topic and get paid lots of money to think. That's how I kind of imagined it. And I thought, you know, academia, you know, you see all those images of, you know, eccentric professors in the media. And I thought, right, okay, academia is where we belong. Not just because of the stereotypes, but also because what I know our strengths are as autistic people and what I understand academia needs. So then the question is, where are we? And why aren't there more of us? So where are all these autistic people who ideally belong in academia? Why aren't we visible? Why aren't there more of us? And why aren't the ones of us that there are there really, really high profile and visible to everyone? So that was my question. So the bits that I'm going to present to you today, this is part of a larger longitudinal project, and I'll talk to you a bit at the end about what happened with all the rest of the data that I have. When I started this out, my goal was I wanted to recruit 6 autistic academics to tell me their stories. So I posted on my Facebook page and a couple of other places, and I had 37 people sign up, which blew me away. So I did answer the question. Yes, there are definitely autistic academics out there. And I asked these 37 people each month to write a reflection on a topic. So I would send them an email with a topic and say, this is this month's topic. Here's some prompts, but you can just write whatever you want to on this topic. And of those 37 people, 28 stayed the full year and completed all 12 reflections. 31 people completed. So every topic was optional because I recognize that some things may not be relevant for some people. So for example, there might have been a topic on diagnosis and some people didn't have a diagnosis, or a topic on disclosure and some people may not have had something to say. So there was an option of completing or not completing each topic. But as you can see, people really got involved in this, and I was absolutely overwhelmed with the generosity of my participants, like how much they were prepared to share about their lives and their experiences. And they did that because they really cared about making things better for other academics. And for me, that created for me this obligation to really share this information. Okay, so just a little bit of demographics. So you can see predominantly female. That's probably just consistent with who participates in research, as we all know. The majority had a formal diagnosis. A couple of people were in the process. By the end of the study, the yes, I have a diagnosis category was larger. So a number of people went through the diagnosis process during the study. No one came to the conclusion by the end of the year that they weren't autistic. And people came from a range of different countries. So I had initially thought they'd all come from Australia because that's where I am, but you can see there was a pretty good spread, predominantly though Australia, the US and Canada. Obviously, you know, researcher positionality, I'm an autistic person working in academia. So, you know, I bring to that my own perspectives and experiences, and I was very much an insider researcher. So these people were talking to me about experiences that were very similar in some ways to mine. And I have to admit, I enjoyed this study so much because it really helped me with my own self-identity and self-confidence, because it was really reassuring for me reading people's reflections and thinking, oh, wow, I'm not the only person who experiences that. Like these 37 other people have those same struggles and same experiences. I tried to be really as involving as I could of other autistic people. So developing the study framework, developing the questions that I was going to use. I talked to a lot of other autistic people. I had other autistic academics that I knew who weren't involved in the study review the questions that I was going to use, the process, the instructions, to make sure that it was clear and it was respectful. And I went through a lot of processes to make sure this was as autistic friendly as possible. And also, because these were transcripts and not interviews, I didn't need to get people to sort of check the interview, did I transcribe it correctly, because these were their written reflections. But what I did do is with each paper that I wrote, I sent the results to the participants so that they could read through what I had done with their quotes. Had I actually accurately summarized what they'd said and what they thought? And was this an accurate reflection on their experiences? My screen doesn't want to change. Okay, so I'm just going to whiz through some of the findings, and then I will also tell you where you can find more detail on all of this. As Brett's told me to stick to 30 minutes, and I definitely will stick to under 30 minutes. All right, barriers and facilitators. What are the things that make it hard or easy for us to be in academia? So this was round 7 of my study. I asked people some questions about barriers and facilitators to being an autistic in academia. And everyone answered this question. So obviously this was something that really mattered to people. Now, I know I should have asked this. Is everyone here, Brett? I can see your face, so you can nod or shake your head. Is everyone here participating in this call autistic? Or do we not know?
I'll indicate what I'm seeing in the chat here, Sandra.
Okay.
We're seeing several initial responses say yes. We do have folks in the community who are neurodivergent and who are closely connected to the autism community. Yep. But yeah.
Okay, so I just
proportion here, but not
I just put this caution in there. So for anyone who's not autistic or not neurodivergent, that before I talk about the key themes from the research, one of the really important things that came through in this study is just how hard it is to be an autistic autism researcher. Because so much of the literature that we read is really ableist and dehumanizing, not just the literature, but also the experiences that we have in classes that we go to, in conferences that we attend. The way that people talk about autism and autistic people is so offensive and ableist, and, you know, just this, we're always being spoken about as, you know, risk factors and challenges and defects and causes and cures, and so many of my participants commented on how that was one of the really hard things about being an autistic in academia, particularly as an autism researcher, just this constant message that there's a problem with us and how sort of really exhausting that is. So I just wanted to flag that right up front as one of my big takeaways about one of the things that makes it hard. All right, so some of the barriers. Social interaction is complicated. It's complicated for everyone. But for us as autistic people, those complexities and challenges of social interaction, understanding and following the social rules, interpreting people's actions, masking, all those things. But what's really, really difficult in academia for a lot of us is this combination of professional and personal interactions, that there's so much overlap. You know, you're going to a meeting and there's an agenda, but people also want to talk about what they watched on television, or you know, the weather or something else. And then there's work meetings, but then there's after work meetings, and just those nuances of trying to be social and friendly, but also get the work done, which a lot of people said was complicated and really exhausting. But also, one of the novel things about academia for people in terms of social interaction was the number of new people, because you get new classes every year, and so new students every year. And so there's this constant, you know, you need to learn new faces, new people, new ways of interacting. But so many people reflected on the enjoyment and satisfaction they got from interpersonal interactions, because it provides them an opportunity to share their knowledge, to help other people learn, and to make a difference in the world. So there were so many comments about both the joy of actually sharing that knowledge and watching a student understand something and, you know, get it and feel that they'd help someone understand something, but also the opportunity to really make a difference in someone's life. That, you know, we're doing research, whatever it is that we're doing in academia, we're actually making the world a better place, particularly a better place for autistic people. The second challenge that people talked about was so much to juggle. So, you know, when we imagine academia, we imagine just being able to focus on our work. But actually, there's a lot to juggle. So it's not just focusing on the academic work. There's this breadth of activity, so many different things. That is administration, and there's teaching, and there's research. But there's also this performance aspect of the role, which a lot of people found really challenging. So many of us are perfectionists, and we want to get all of those aspects right. And so we work 5 times as hard as neurotypical people to make sure that everything's right and everything. And then we're exhausted and we're overwhelmed. And we have to perform. So we have to stand up in front of a class, and we have to be articulate and smiley and happy and engaging and in lots of ways not autistic, in order to get really good teacher evaluations. So there's a lot of those things to juggle that are more than just being knowledgeable and good at the academic area that we're in. However, academia is pretty unique in the amount of flexibility and autonomy that it offers us. So the capacity to make our own decisions, to focus on areas of research or teaching that's of interest to us, and to work in ways that suit our cognitive processes and sensory needs. So a lot of people commented on things like the ability to be able to work from home a lot of the time, or some of the time, to be able to really focus in, pick research topics that interested them, join research teams that worked in areas that mattered to them. I have to say that this data was collected during COVID, and so many people commented on how the lockdowns had been a life changer for them in terms of that opportunity to work predominantly from home, and how that had given them the capacity to be so much more productive, so much more effective, and, you know, being able to have a lot more control over their environment. We're very different operating systems. So different information processing processes and styles, and that poses challenges. So, you know, we learn differently. We may process information slower or faster or more visually. We might need information in multiple formats. We often have difficulty dealing with change. And those things are poorly understood by non-autistic people. And so there's this assumption that either you can do everything or you can do nothing. So you're really smart, therefore you should get this other stuff. Or you could do it yesterday, so you should be able to do it today. And that lack of awareness of our executive functioning challenges and our operating systems can make it really difficult. One of the things that came up for so many people was this ability to focus and decide what's important. What is it that and this came up a lot in the research I've done with students as well, when we're told, just remember the important parts from the lecture, just focus on the highlights. Like what are the highlights? What's important? Everything's important. All of the details are important. So, sometimes we need more support than we get from our supervisors, our colleagues who don't really understand that the way that we work is different. And that issue around executive functioning and managing and staying organized when we're doing all those different things. And so many of my participants talked about the fact that they manage it really well and they appear really organized at work, and everyone comments on how they're super organized and they get everything done and they manage all this stuff, but they're exhausted. However, what they loved was those cognitive aspects of the role, that they could focus on an area of interest. They love the intellectual components of the role. And so many people commented that academia actually provides a really rare environment where our special interests are actually valued. And we can exercise our cognitive strengths in a way that we can't in many other professions. And people actually talked about feeling like, this is amazing, I'm actually being paid to do what I love. And people want to hear me talk about the thing that I'm really interested in, which I've never had in another work environment. So every challenge that came up had a positive side. It's just working out that balance. We speak different languages, right? So both receptive and expressive communication. So understanding questions from our students and our colleagues, understanding and following really vague instructions from supervisors. We've all been in that situation where you hand in a report and your boss says, oh, it needs to be clearer. Or, it needs to be better targeted at an executive audience. What do you actually mean? What did you want me to do? Following conversations with others. So really understanding the vague way that neurotypical people talk. But also difficulties in our expressive communication. So finding the right words, the expression, the tone of voice. A lot of people talked about this expectation to respond spontaneously. So being put on the spot. So, hey, Bob, what do you think about this? When we actually need time to think and formulate our answers. And there's frequent feeling that people don't really understand or respect our communication because we don't communicate in the way that they do. However, academia also presents an opportunity for connection because our special interests can actually be used as a conversation starter. So, we can go to a conference or we can go to a work meeting and we've actually got something structured to talk about. It's one of the rare places where to suddenly have a conversation about my research or my thing that I'm really interested in and passionate about is normal, whereas it wouldn't be if you were working in a restaurant or a supermarket. So, there is that opportunity to really connect and where potentially in the right environment, our strengths can be really recognized and valued. The physical environment, lots of challenges in the physical environment, constant sensory input in university environments, and institutional policies exacerbate those. I mean, one of my biggest recommendations for universities around supporting autistic people is we need to get past all those policies that are so hierarchy based. Certain people are entitled to offices. This is the way that we do things. This is the way that we're structured. A lot of the modifications that we need are really not that expensive or complicated. They're just about being a bit more compassionate and understanding. However, as I mentioned earlier, that flexibility. So a lot of academic roles do allow people the opportunity to have some control over their work environment. So being able to work from home or being able to go to the library or work in a more quiet place. So as I said, this is like a lightning tour of a very small aspect of the research. So that's part one. Part two's quicker. That's discussed in much more detail in the article that I've listed there. So that's in Autism, that's Autistics Working in Academia. So that goes through in a lot more detail, those barriers and challenges and great things about academia that the participants discussed. And the second thing that I want to talk about briefly, which is another article from the same study, is ask participants, what advice do you have for autistic people who are considering a career in academia? So this was another round of the study. And so I'll just briefly summarize their advice. You need to know the role. So you need to have a really comprehensive understanding of what it entails, the skills that are required, and the benefits and challenges of the environment. So if you're thinking of going into academia, you need to know that it isn't just the ivory tower that you sit and write in, that it's got the teaching, it's got the administration, it's got all those other things, and know whether or not that's something that you really want to take on. If possible, find opportunities to actually experience it before committing to it as a career path. So, can you do an internship? Can you do some sort of experience to actually see what it's like to be in an academic role? So, learn about the structure and the process, find out what the measures of success are in your area of specialization. Everyone talked about the hidden curriculum, right? So, which is hidden for everyone, but it's particularly hidden for us as autistic people. And things like learning when to say yes and when to say no. So what are the things that I actually have to do in my role to be successful? And what are the things that I can say no to so that I don't burn out, but also won't get me in trouble for not fulfilling the requirements of my job? Really, this thing about understanding what are the different responsibilities, and think as well about the pathway. So not just what do I have to do as a junior academic, but what would I need to do if I got to a high level position? Think about things like the meetings, the leadership requirements. Can I do that? And if not, would I be comfortable staying at a lower level? Or is this the right career? Find someone who can teach you about the hidden curriculum. So lots of good suggestions around, really understanding what the role entails, because we go into it thinking that it's going to be much more simple than it actually is. Find the right people. So if you're a PhD student, choose the right PhD advisor. If you're starting your academic career, find the right work supervisor, someone who has a genuine interest, someone who understands autism and is open to autistic ways of thinking and working. So the right supervisor. My last boss, before I left the job that I was in, he actually didn't know anything about autism, but he was really willing to learn. As soon as he found out he was supervising with me, he said, what do I need to know? What do I need to know about you? What do I need to know about working with you? And we had a fantastic relationship, because I could say to him, I need this, this, and this, and I need to be able to do that. And this is the way that I work. And he was really open to, well, how can we make this work? Find a mentor. Mentors are magic. Autistic mentors are good because they can help you understand how to navigate as an autistic person. But I was thinking having a non-autistic mentor as well is good. Someone who can help you understand those other people and sort of interpret for you. Develop a network, and try and understand other people's communication preferences, because neurotypical people can communicate really weird. How do you communicate with your colleagues? There's lots of that really weird stuff around formality and informality at different levels. Networks are really important, and it's something we struggle with. Neurotypical people seem to just naturally be able to socialize in a way that we can't, and to kind of smooth that way. And that's where other autistic people can be really valuable. Networks like this, the College Autism Network. I mean, I think this is a fantastic resource that you guys have. You can actually connect to each other and reach out for support. Know yourself and value yourself. There's lots of evidence that we are less able to accurately access our own skills, and we have lower self-perceptions. Like, we don't recognize our own strengths. We've gone through life being told all the things that are wrong with us, and we don't realize that we actually have these skills and capacities, and we undervalue ourselves. So a clear understanding of your strengths and your challenges will help you navigate academia. It will help you value the skills that you have, but also develop the skills that you need. and to work out what opportunities are right for you and which ones will burn you out. And you just shouldn't go there because it's not in your skill set. And you need to develop resilience, bounce back from rejection. Sometimes people are going, academia is a uniquely critical place. It is the only career I've ever worked in where it appears that the role of your colleagues is to tell you what's wrong with what you did. And everything's competitive. You write a journal article, people critique it. You put in a grant application, people critique it, right? So you need to be resilient. You need to really develop that sense of, okay, these are the things that I can do, and I have these skills and I have these strengths. And be kind to yourself. We all fail sometimes along the way, but it's really, really important to have a clear sense of what your strengths are, what your values are, and what works for you. Maintain balance. Lots of people talked about this. Practical things to make sure that you stay in control of your own well-being. Self-care, work-life balance, schedules. Can you change your physical environment to reduce the sensory input? Self-advocacy where you can. Remember that the job is important, but being alive and being healthy and being a whole happy human being is more important. Obviously, there's a whole complexity around disclosure. If I disclose, I can ask for the supports and resources that I need, but I also risk stigma and discrimination. And I'm sure that every single person in this call has had that dilemma. So, I don't have a magical solution. And I would say of my participants, probably less than half had actually disclosed for exactly that reason, and some who had disclosed, it had been a really positive experience for them, and some it had been a really negative experience for them. My kind of final tip was proceed with caution, but with passion, right? So people said there's lots of obstacles, right? You need to have a really strong internal motivation to overcome those. You need to really, really want to be an academic to get through the meetings and the challenges and the criticism and all that stuff. But academia has some huge benefits as a career for autistic people, particularly that ability to focus on and be valued for our strengths, our special interests, our ability to hyper-focus, all of those other things that make us really unique and special individuals. But, a lot of those comments about try it out, if it makes you happy, remember that, this is something you have to really love, right? So it's an opportunity, if you end up in the right role, doing the right thing, to really build a career around your special interests, build a career around the things that you're really passionate about, and making wise choices along the way. And sometimes that means really standing up for ourselves. So sometimes saying no to some opportunities because it means you're going to end up teaching or researching in this area that really doesn't interest you. So, really being careful about the choices that we make and standing up for the things that we really value and want to do. That in a lot more detail is in that article also in Autism. So this one was published shortly after the first one, and this is called Advice for Autistic People Considering a Career in Academia. As I say, a huge thank you to my 37 participants who were just so generous in sharing. And that's just a tiny, tiny part of what they shared. There's, as I said, that's a summary of what's in more detail in those articles, and those articles are a minuscule proportion of what they shared. Brett said I could tell you this. I'm so excited. I've just finished a manuscript that's been accepted by Cambridge. So there's actually a book coming out that includes the reflections on all 12 topics across the year. And so there's chapters on things like disclosure and masking and attending conferences, all kinds of different topics. And yeah, these were just amazing people who shared awesome stories. And I know for me, reading those reflections helped me so much in feeling comfortable in myself as an academic and feeling like I wasn't alone. I'm really optimistic that the book will do that for other people. So thank you for listening to this. And sorry it was so fast because I just had so much I wanted to tell you. But happy to answer any questions.
That was fantastic, Sandra. Thank you so much. Such a really important member of our community, and thank you for elevating all these perspectives. I know we have some folks who are interested in posing questions or sharing comments with you. I'm seeing Mark and Daniel. So if maybe Mark, you want to go first, and then Daniel, and then if others want to either raise their hands or throw in questions in the chat.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. This is more of a broader question. Just from my own personal experience through my own research in autism, as being an autistic researcher himself and doing his dissertation on advocacy and all that. I've noticed that in areas outside, or mainly other English-speaking countries outside of the US, like for example in the UK, Britain, and Australia, there seems to be a bit more robust and proactive approach and for like autism acceptance culture in those regions. Do you feel this is true? And if so, what does this kind of look like in the academia world?
I don't know. I'd love to say that there is this sort of autism acceptance culture. I think that a lot of it's very superficial. So I'll go very personal here in answering that question. I found that it is a really, really individual thing. So I was working at an institution that was ostensibly very neurodivergent friendly, very open. We had a change of leadership, and then I found that there were certain things where we're very happy to accept the strengths that you bring as an autistic person, but could you just park that challenge because it's a bit of a problem for us. I also found throughout my post-disclosure career sort of certain assumptions made about me as a person on the basis of being autistic that were contrary to what had actually happened. I demonstrate a skill for 20 years and then people find out I'm autistic and suddenly they think that I won't have that skill because I'm autistic. So, I think in, like Australia and the UK, there's a lot more being done around, sort of that public autism awareness, autism acceptance. But I still think there's still a superficial element to that. I mean, we do some research. It's called the Inclusion Monitor. So it's each 4 years we do a national survey of community perceptions and the autistics community's experiences. And I have to say that in terms of the actual experiences of autistic people, in terms of experiencing stigma, discrimination, isolation, exclusion, things haven't really changed a great deal. And particularly for adults, I think we're moving forward in people being a bit more understanding and accepting and inclusive of autistic children. But there's a long way to go with autistic adults in pretty much every country I've had anything to do with anyway. I don't know if that answers your question.
A little bit, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that one, Mark. Let's turn it over to Daniel.
Hi, thank you so much for this wonderful talk. I really appreciated it. My question is mostly about teaching. I am currently a PhD student at CUNY. And at CUNY, we all have to, each graduate students have to go through at least 3 years of teaching, which I have started this year. But unfortunately, it is proving to be very hard. The hardest part of the program so far for me. I'm trying to work on a solution. Yeah, thank you, TC, City University of New York. I'm trying to work on a solution with my advisor and my support system. but I still feel very socially anxious when I have to teach because of the perfectionism. I struggle with perfectionism a lot. I feel like I must give absolutely everything that I am possibly able to give and more. And that if I don't, that means I must be bad at teaching. So I struggle with that very much. And I'm wondering, how did you navigate teaching?
Um, so what you've just shared was echoed by quite a few of the participants, and it definitely resonates with my own experience of finding it absolutely exhausting. I did exactly the same thing. I taught for a very limited period of time. I got out of teaching as quickly as possible. I found research. I loved research, and in the Australian system, we don't teach while we're doing our PhD. It's a very different model to the US model around the way we do it. Our PhD is structured very differently. And so you're going to teaching straight afterwards. And we have a model where if you get enough research grants, you can buy yourself out of teaching. And that's what I did as quickly as possible because of exactly that. You know, I would teach and my colleagues would just get last year's teaching course outline and just change the date on the front page from, 2019 to 2020, and then just change the dates on the presentation slides and go and do it. And I would spend, weeks rewriting every single presentation and putting new things in the slides and updating all the research and making everything and rehearsing my presentations. And because exactly that, it had to be perfect. There couldn't be a mistake, and I had to be engaging and entertaining and interesting, and I had to know everything. And if there was any chance that a student asked a question and I couldn't answer the question, I would just be like, oh my goodness, I'm an absolute failure. I'm never going to. So I know exactly how you feel. My way was because we have a different system. I was able to get, and I only did any teaching for the first 2 or 3 years of my academic career. I haven't taught in over 2 decades. That's not necessarily the solution for you. The only thing that I can suggest, I don't know exactly how your structure works, but is there any way that you can kind of negotiate with them to do some sort of much smaller class teaching? Like, is there some way that you could instead be working with like honors students or, research project students or something, so that you were, working with a smaller group of students? Yeah, I would be really working at ways around that. I don't have a magical solution because it's just the way some of us are built. And as I said, a number of my participants were the same. We can't do it. We can't stand up there and present something that we don't think is perfect.
Yeah, I am. Thank you so much. I am working on a solution. I'm in the process of actually registering accommodations officially to help me out with this.
Yeah.
So
So
I'm,
maybe they could, you could do some research assistant work or something instead, or work on curriculum, or yeah.
yeah, thank you so much.
But you're very normal. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just like the rest of us. It's the way our brains work. We're just better than them, and they don't get it.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
What other questions might folks have for Sandra? We have about 7-8 minutes.
Sorry, if you see me, I'm just typing because someone asked me a direct question in the chat, so I'm just responding to it. But I can answer any questions anyone asks.
I'll throw one out there, Sandra, as we wait for
Yep.
perhaps someone else to chime in. And certainly folks can check out your articles, and I put the hyperlinks in the chat for them to engage with them further. What's your biggest take away your reflection, having read over those reflections and engaged with all those academics? What was like the most singular aha moment or takeaway that you gleaned from having engaged in this work?
I think it would be how much we internalize the stigma. One of the things that came up for me so often in so many different contexts was how often we accept the way that we're treated. So, for example, it would come up where someone would say, you know, I disclosed and then people treated me differently, you know, even working in an autism related environment, you know, I disclosed and then, you know, people treated me like I wasn't as smart, or they, you know, they had different expectations of me, or a number of examples of things that people talked about, you know. So I work in this autism research center, and I go in there and they know I'm autistic, but I sit in this noisy space near the photocopy machine, and I share an office and people walk past and distract me all the time. But I guess they're doing the best that they can. And, you know, for me, that was probably the fact that we are so over a lifetime accustomed to accepting that it's us, that we should make accommodations, that we should accept that our life is hard and that we want is, and so just so many of those comments from people, you know, that I'll only ask for accommodations if I think they won't inconvenience anyone, or I'll only ask for things if I think they won't cost the organization money, or they won't be difficult, or it won't be irritating for anyone. I try to avoid upsetting people. The amount that we tiptoe around our lives so as not to inconvenience others or be seen as annoying or impose on anyone. That for me was a big takeaway. That this group of 37 people who are brilliant and capable and competent and doing amazing things and so committed to changing the world and making it a better place for other people, so many of them accept being trod on because, you know, we just have to accept that we shouldn't inconvenience anyone else. That was the big takeaway for me.
Thanks for sharing that. That definitely resonates. We have probably time for two questions. Tony has their hand raised, and then TC has a question in the chat. So go ahead, Tony.
Hi, thank you so much for this. This has been an eye-opener for me. You don't teach, but you do a lot of presenting, I'm guessing, with your research. And I was wondering, do you deal with the experiences of masking in order to communicate to populations? And if so, what does that cost you? And do you have any suggestions as to how to create an environment that bypasses that need?
Yes, I do. Oh, so you're the person who put the message in the chat that I was just trying to answer. Oh yeah. Yes, I do. So different amounts for masking depending on who I'm talking to. I mean, obviously less in this context than in most. These, like, if it's a presentation like this on Zoom, then there's a lot of things that I can do that make it easier. So here, like I'm on Zoom, I can stim, nobody can see what my hands are doing. So, you know, that's fine. I look like I'm dressed for work. I have what I actually have here is like a scarf thing on. Underneath, I'm in my comfy, non-scratchy, non-irritating, stretchy cotton clothes. So I'm wearing something that's comfortable. I can stim, no one can see me. I was talking to my husband the other day. One of the things that I've discovered that I do, and I sort of do it subconsciously the first thing I do when I'm on a Zoom meeting like this is I look at the list of participants, because I get really intimidated by all these people here and thinking, what are these people think? You know, how do I need to mask for all these different people? The first thing I do in a presentation like this is I look at the list of participants and I see if there's someone in the list that I know. And then I imagine that the rest of the people aren't here. I minimize all your heads so I can't see you. And I do the whole presentation like I'm talking to that one person that I know. and then I can feel like I'm in. So in this case, hi TC. So that's the way that I cope with it on Zoom, and that makes it a lot easier for me. When I'm doing face-to-face presentations, and yes, I do lots of them, particularly since the book came out. So I do a lot of talks about the book. So, you know, book festivals, library talks, that sorts of things. But I also do a lot of professional development sessions in workplaces. And those are harder because those are about talking to neurotypical people about how to support autistic people in workplaces, in universities, in healthcare. And so there is more of an expectation to mask there. I schedule very carefully. I never do more than 2 in a week. I always make sure that they're separated by several days. If I'm physically going somewhere, my husband always drives me. And we have the car set up so that, you know, I have my water bottle. I'm a knitter. That's my favorite stim. So I take my knitting, I knit in the car on the way there. He will go in, like if it's a public event, he will go in there first. Like when I do a library talk, he goes in there first. He checks the lighting, he checks the setup of the room. Like he makes sure that everything's, so that I don't have to go in and kind of introduce and like get exhausted before it even starts. I do the talk. I do as little networking and stuff as possible afterwards. Like if this, you know, like if people want to ask me questions, I answer the questions. People want me to sign my book, I sign my book, that sort of stuff. Like I try to be nice. And then I go home and I do not interact with anyone for the rest of that day. And depending on how big or how exhausting the event was, probably the day after. So, you know, I couldn't do what I'm doing now and also still be in the job that I was in. So it was a conscious decision that I really want to be able to advocate for change. I really want to be able to do something for my community. I can't do that and hold my job in academia because this presentation stuff, this masking is too exhausting, but it's also too important. Because for me, when the book came out and people were saying to me, I read your book and this is the impact it had on my life, I thought, wow, I can do more with that and these talks than I can by being a professor in a university. But yeah, it's exhausting. And I do spend the rest of the day and often the next day curled up on my sofa with my knitting and my cat and the lights turned down really, really low and not talking to my husband. So that's how I cope.
Thank you.
Sandra, thank you so much. We are at the hour mark, but I know TC had a question in the chat, and I want to honor us to have time for that. So we'll make that our last question. The question is, what did you learn about yourself through this process? Did anything change in terms of how you see our academic autistic community?
What did I learn about myself? I learned that I'm okay. So I spent most of my academic career, I guess like a lot of people, thinking I need to try harder because why am I struggling with all these things that everybody else finds easier? And I guess I kind of knew cognitively that as an autistic person, some things were harder for me than they were for other people. But I still thought, but I'm smart, right? And I'm a professor and I'm in a very, very senior position in a university and I should be able to handle all of that. So why am I struggling with all these other things? And suddenly I met 37 other people who understood how I felt. And I read their reflections and I thought, wow, that's me. And so what I learned from this process is I'm okay, right? Like I respect and admire so many of these people and they're like me. They share the challenges that so I'm okay, right? I don't need to fix me. I'm not broken. I'm not flawed. It's okay to be who I am. That's what I learned about me. What I learned about our autistic community is that the world is not kind to us. You know, I read 37 stories where people were not treated fairly and equitably and kindly by not just by academia, but people also reflected on things that happened to them in their personal lives and out in the community. And I got angry. And that's why I decided that this is what I want to do with the rest of my career. You know, I want to educate universities and workplaces and healthcare about how to actually be more inclusive and supportive, and how little changes that you could make that cost you nothing could actually enable us to live in the world and thrive, and just how much value autistic people have to give if you would just actually listen and notice and see what we have to offer.
A really thoughtful note to end on. I think we should all send our appreciation again to you, Sandra. Thank you for sharing such thoughtful and personal and ultimately thought-provoking research with everybody here today. We will see you back here via a campus meeting in January. Dates to be announced. And like I said, if you are interested in sharing your thoughts on timing of future Canvas meetings, recommending particular researchers, presenters, or self-volunteering yourself, please put that in the Google form, and I'll send that out as well. So look forward to seeing you all in the near future, and we'll keep you apprised. We'll have this meeting recording distributed to folks. So thank you again for being here, and have a good weekend ahead.
Thank you.